accuses Black Waitress of using his computer. Secretly, shocked to see the code, she wrote, "Who gave you permission to touch my laptop?" The sharp voice sliced through the calm of the executive lounge like a broken wine glass hitting the floor. Heads turned. A black waitress in her mid-20s stood frozen near the corner table where she had just set down an empty coffee cup. Her name tag read Jada Brooks, and her dark brown eyes blinked in disbelief. She wore her hair in a neat bun, soft curls framing her high cheekbones. Her black slacks and crisp white shirt were perfectly ironed, her apron spotless. Every motion she made, graceful, quiet, was a reflection of the standards she held herself to. Across from her stood Peter Langston, the CEO of Langtech, a towering figure in the tech industry. In his early 50s, he wore an immaculate navy suit and the ego of a man used to being obeyed without question. His silver watch glinted beneath the expensive cuff, but it was his eyes, cold, sharp, and narrowed, that did the real damage. Excuse me?" Jada said, clutching the coffee pot tighter. "You heard me," he snapped. "I saw you at my workstation. Don't try to lie." She looked over at the open laptop at the far end of the lounge. The screen glowed softly with rows of code. "I was just clearing dishes. I didn't touch anything." Peter scoffed. "Right, a waitress writing Python. Don't insult my intelligence." A soft chuckle spread through the room from his executive assistant, then from two junior execs seated nearby. Their laughter wasn't loud, but it was humiliating. It was the kind that seeps into your skin that makes you shrink from the inside. Jada's throat tightened, but she didn't cry. She didn't even flinch. She just stood straighter. "I'm not sure what you think you saw," she said quietly, "but I would never violate someone's property." He stepped closer. "Security will be reviewing the footage. If I find anything, you're done." Then he turned and strode off, leaving a silence thick enough to choke on. This wasn't the first time something like this had happened, but this was the worst. Never before had someone of his status so publicly accused her of something so outrageous. And for what? Standing near a laptop. After the lounge cleared, Jada slipped into the back pantry. Her heart pounded in her chest, not from guilt, but from fury. And something else hurt. This job was supposed to be temporary, just nights and weekends to help pay rent while she coded on her own time. She had dreams, big ones, building educational apps for underprivileged youth, developing open-source software to make tech more accessible for kids of color. But dreams needed money, and people like Peter Langston made sure girls like her stayed behind the coffee station. Her fingers twitched with the familiar itch of unfinished code. If only he knew. But of course, he didn't. Later that evening, just before closing, Jada overheard two interns talking near the kitchen door. They were laughing about Peter's little scare and how some random waitress actually typed something into his code base. "She must have thought she was slick," one chuckled. "Imagine her writing real code. Please." The other snorted. "Dude, I saw the terminal. She typed a recursive function, and it ran, no bugs." There was a pause. "No bugs?" "Not one." Jada leaned against the wall, her mind racing. Did they see her, or had the CEO just assumed it was her? Either way, the code had executed, but she hadn't touched the computer. Or had she? A slow realization spread through her. Hours ago, when she was cleaning the lounge, she had passed by Peter's laptop. The screen had been black. She noticed an IDE open. Her fingers had itched to fix the snippet of broken code on the screen, just out of muscle memory. In the time it took her to collect 2 empty cups, she had added 3 lines and corrected a syntax error. She didn't even think. It was like breathing. Could that small instinct be what triggered the accusation? Now, it all made sense. The next day, the company's head of security called her in. The office was sleek, all glass walls and brushed metal. The man sitting across from her, a calm and composed black man named Marcus, glanced over a tablet and then looked at her. "You're not in trouble," he said first. "In fact, I wanted to ask you a question." Jada raised an eyebrow. "Are you the one who cleaned up that memory leak in the custom CRM module yesterday?" Her breath caught. "I might have." "Peter thinks it was a breach," Marcus said. "But I reviewed the footage. You never touched the keyboard. You just paused for a few seconds, looked at the screen, and walked away. But somehow the auto-run script finished clean, with one added function, one perfect function." Jada swallowed. He tapped his fingers. "I'm not here to get you fired. I'm here to understand how a waitress spotted and fixed an error my junior dev team's been wrestling with for 2 weeks." The door opened again. A woman in her 40s, wearing a tailored blazer and a no-nonsense expression, stepped inside. Her presence filled the room. "This is Rachel Monroe," Marcus said, "CTO." Rachel studied Jada. "Do you write code?" Jada nodded slowly. Rachel held up the tablet. "Then tell me what this means." It was the exact snippet she had adjusted. Jada's eyes scanned it, and she didn't hesitate. It was an inefficient recursion. The termination condition didn't account for nested dependencies, so I restructured it into a tail recursive loop with memory optimization. That way it wouldn't crash when handling dynamic values beyond threshold. Silence. Then Rachel smiled. Marcus let out a low whistle. "Damn," Rachel sat across from her. "Would you consider doing more than pouring coffee?" Jada blinked. "I'm serious," Rachel continued. "We run mentorships, internal apprenticeships. We've never had someone come up through food service, but you're different." Before she could answer, Peter barged into the room. "What's she doing here?" he demanded. Rachel didn't flinch. "Interviewing," he scoffed. "She's a server. She has no clearance." Rachel cut him off. "She's the one who fixed your CRM bug." Peter's jaw dropped. "I watched the footage. You owe her an apology." He opened his mouth, but no words came out. And for the first time in her life, Jada watched a man like him be forced to see her, not as a server, but as a developer, as a mind, as someone who belonged in the room. And something in her straightened even more than before. This story was just beginning. The air in the CEO's lounge had shifted. What started as a simple accusation had cracked something deeper, something most of the staff hadn't dared name out loud. Whispers filled the corners of the cafe kitchen and the break room. "Did you hear what happened with Eliza and Mr. Callahan? They said she was caught using his laptop, but she walked out like she didn't do a damn thing wrong." Eliza Brooks, 26, had just clocked out. Her apron folded over her arm, her curls tied high, and her chestnut brown eyes sharp with thought. The city lights of downtown Seattle cast their golden hue on her dark skin as she stepped out onto the sidewalk, but in her mind she was still standing in front of that man, still seeing the disbelief on his face. "That wasn't just code," she murmured to herself. "That was the damn future." Earlier that morning, Eliza had stayed behind her shift. The cafe was nearly empty, just a few execs lingering with espresso and spreadsheets. She sat quietly behind the bar, typing on her own tiny notebook, not Mr. Callahan's. But when she had leaned forward to grab a rag, his unlocked MacBook was within view, and she couldn't help noticing the bug in the code he'd left open. A missing semicolon, an inefficient loop, Something elementary, yet overlooked. Without thinking, she corrected it. And that was her mistake. Or maybe her moment. Now, back in her small apartment, Eliza sat on the floor, surrounded by notebooks filled with lines of Python and C++. Her fingers trembled, not with fear, but something closer to fury. "He didn't even ask," she said to no one. "He accused, just like that." Meanwhile, in a private boardroom 15 stories above, Miles Callahan, 44, CEO of Neuronix Technologies, was pacing. A man used to control, he couldn't get the image out of his head, this waitress, with her calm voice and clear confidence, standing over his laptop and improving his code. "She rewrote my entire module in under 5 minutes, he muttered, rubbing the back of his neck. "And she made it more efficient." "How the hell?" The VP of Engineering, Jeremy Lin, raised an eyebrow. "Maybe she's someone we should talk to instead of, calling her out like a criminal in front of the staff." Miles scoffed. "She's a waitress, Jeremy." "Then why is her logic tree cleaner than yours?" Jeremy shot back, deadpan. Miles fell silent. That night, Jeremy went down a rabbit hole. Using the cafe's internal logs, he found a record of Eliza's login activity, not on Miles's device, but on a secondary company terminal meant for casual browsing by VIP guests. No unauthorized access. No breach. She hadn't done anything wrong. The next day, Miles returned to the cafe early. He was expecting to find Eliza there, waiting tables like every morning. But her shift had been swapped. She wasn't there. Instead, he saw Maggie, the senior hostess. "Where's the young woman who usually takes the early tables?" he asked, trying to keep his tone casual. "Eliza? She's off today," Maggie replied, eyeing him with suspicion. He hesitated. "Do you happen to know anything about her background?" Maggie crossed her arms. "Only that she's got more degrees than half the people who eat here. Just finished her 3rd year in computer science at UW. Self-taught before that. She takes night classes and works doubles. Anything else you need to know, maybe you should ask her yourself." The words landed harder than expected. Back in the apartment, Eliza's phone buzzed, an unknown number. "This is Eliza." "Hi, this is Miles Callahan from Neuronix. I think we got off on the wrong foot yesterday." Eliza's voice was ice. "Did we? Because from where I stood, you accused me of hacking your laptop in front of your staff, and when I showed you what I did, you walked out." A beat of silence. "You're right," he said finally. "I was wrong, and I want to make it right. Would you consider having lunch with me? Not at the cafe, somewhere neutral. I'd like to hear more about what you wrote." Eliza paused. "You want to hear about my code now? I want to understand how a waitress rewrote our flagship security architecture in 5 minutes flat." Another pause. "I'll think about it," she said, then hung up. That evening, Eliza sat on a rooftop overlooking the skyline, her best friend Jada beside her. "You think I should go?" Jada shrugged. "Only if you're walking in like the badass you are. Don't go looking for an apology. Go because he needs to see that you're 10 steps ahead." Eliza smiled. "That's the thing. I always was." Back at Neuronix HQ, Jeremy approached Miles in the hallway. "So, you talked to her?" "She's considering it." Jeremy handed him a folder. "You might want to read this before she decides. It's her file." Miles frowned. "You've been digging?" "Not really, just typed her name into the GitHub she left logged in yesterday. You'll want to see the number of forks on that encryption module she built 2 months ago. She's got followers from Stanford, MIT. Some guy at DARPA even bookmarked her repo." Miles flipped through the printouts. His jaw tensed. She wasn't just good, she was better than anyone on his team, and he'd tried to humiliate her. The twist was sinking in fast. The next morning, Eliza received an email. Subject line, Consulting Proposal, Neuronics Technologies. Attached was a 6-figure offer. She smiled, shut her laptop, and walked to work anyway, because before anything else, she had tables to clear. But deep down, she knew the game had changed, and this time she was playing to win. It was just past noon when the conference room buzzed with impatient voices. The morning's drama with Ava had already made its way through the upper management grapevine, and the whispers weren't dying down. Gregory Langston, the CEO of Langtech, had called for an impromptu senior staff meeting, citing a breach of internal protocol as the reason. That was code for what everyone knew to be the incident. Ava stood quietly outside the room, tray of coffee balanced in her hands. She had been asked no, ordered to bring refreshments for the meeting. As if being publicly accused wasn't enough, now she was serving coffee to people who probably thought she was a thief. Her hands trembled slightly, but her jaw was set. She wasn't going to show weakness, not today. Inside, Gregory paced like a man on the verge of some self-righteous revelation. "Gentlemen and ladies," he said, placing his palms firmly on the glass table, "we've got a serious issue. Someone accessed our proprietary development environment without authorization this morning." Murmurs passed through the room. "The AI codebase," Gregory continued, "was altered, not destroyed, not tampered with, altered in a way that fixed bugs we didn't even know existed." That silenced the room. "What are you saying?" asked Jessica from R&D, squinting. "I'm saying someone in this building, possibly someone unauthorized, wrote something into our system that's beyond our current capabilities. They used syntax that predates even our internal documentation. It's old, obscure, and brilliant." The CTO, Raj, raised his eyebrows. "So this wasn't a breach to harm us?" Gregory's face twisted. "That's not the point. This person bypassed every security layer we have. They could have done anything. Instead, they wrote better code than half of you in this room." A hush fell. Gregory turned to the assistant at the door and nodded. "Bring her in." Ava stepped into the room, back straight, eyes defiant. She placed the tray on the sideboard, then turned to face them all. "You accused me of hacking your system," she said. "So tell me, what exactly am I doing here now? Another round of humiliation?" Gregory folded his arms. "Explain how your fingerprints were on my computer." Ava took a slow breath. "I never touched your machine, but I did touch your broken security system. I wrote a script last week to test something, a challenge I gave myself, and apparently your firewall's as fragile as your ego." A snort of laughter broke out from the end of the table, then quickly died as Gregory glared. "So you're admitting it?" "I'm saying your system let me in without even asking me to knock." Raj leaned forward. "What exactly did you write?" Ava blinked, surprised by the curiosity in his voice. "I wrote a self-optimizing thread allocator for your AI engine. Your code was leaking memory. You were 3 weeks from a complete crash." The room erupted. Jessica stood. "That's impossible. We've had 4 teams reviewing that module for months." Ava shrugged. "And I'm just a waitress, right?" Gregory slammed a hand on the table. "Why didn't you report it? Go through the proper channels?" Ava stepped forward. "Because if I walked into your office saying I found a critical bug in your $1 million code, you would have laughed. Or worse, done exactly what you did this morning." Gregory's mouth twitched, but he said nothing. Then Raj spoke again, slowly. Greg, she's right. I just cross-checked the logs. Her script solved the memory leak we've been chasing for months, and it didn't just patch it, it restructured the logic tree behind our neural net priorities. Someone whispered, Jesus. Gregory looked as if someone had kicked him in the gut. Wait, Jessica said suddenly. Are you saying that the reason our AI passed the last benchmark was because of her? Raj nodded. And if we present this model at the investor demo next week, we'll blow the competition out of the water. Silence. All eyes were now on Ava. But she wasn't smiling. Her lips were tight, her gaze cold. You called me in here like I was a criminal. You talked about unauthorized access like I was some hacker in a hoodie. But none of you asked how I even knew how to code. Raj looked at her with genuine curiosity. So how did you? Ava turned to him. I studied computer engineering at Howard. Top 4 of my class. Dropped out in my senior year because my mother got sick. I took jobs like this to pay her hospital bills. Jessica leaned back, stunned. Why didn't you say something? Apply? Would you have hired me? Or would you have wondered why a black woman with no degree and a waitress's resume thought she could build AI? Silence again. Gregory cleared his throat, defensive. Let's not turn this into some... Ava cut him off. No, let's. Because that's what this is. You saw my skin and my job title and thought I didn't belong. But my code is in your system now, saving your company. Raj broke the tension with a slow nod. You should be on the dev team. Gregory stiffened. Hold on, she breached company protocol. And she saved our asses, Raj replied. Gregory looked around the room, suddenly unsure of his grip. The authority he wielded all morning now hung awkwardly in the air. Jessica said, If we're smart, we fix this. She's the best thing to happen to Langtech this quarter. Finally, Gregory turned to Ava. Let's say we start fresh. You come in for a proper interview. Ava laughed once short, sharp. I'm not interested in your interview. I came here to earn a paycheck and write code to prove I still could. That's done. She turned to leave but paused at the door. But maybe I'll start something of my own, something that doesn't assume someone's value based on their uniform. Then she was gone. Inside the room, no one moved. Outside, Ava walked back toward the service elevator, heart pounding, head high. She didn't have a plan. Yet. But for the first time in years, she felt like she was back in the game. And somewhere deep inside Langtech's mainframe, her code was still running flawless, elegant, undeniable. The air in the restaurant was different now, thicker, quieter. Ever since the incident with the CEO, whispers had followed Layla like shadows. She still moved with grace, but there was a weariness in her eyes that hadn't been there before. The regulars were watching her closer. The kitchen staff gave her sympathetic glances. But not everyone was rooting for her. 2 days after the confrontation, Layla was restocking the bar when Tiffany, one of the senior servers, approached with a smug grin and a clipboard. Layla, manager wants to see you in the office. Something about a security issue. Layla set the wine bottle down slowly. Security? Tiffany shrugged, overly casual. No idea, but I'd hurry if I were you. As Layla made her way to the manager's office, her stomach twisted. The door was half open, and inside sat Justin, the restaurant manager, fidgeting with his pen. Across from him sat a man in a navy blazer, arms folded, Logan. His presence was like a cold draft. Justin looked up nervously. Layla, come in. She stepped in, keeping her expression unreadable. What's this about? Logan didn't waste time. We reviewed the surveillance footage. You accessed my laptop. That's corporate property. You could be charged with corporate espionage. Justin glanced at Logan, clearly uneasy. I told Mr. Grant we should handle this internally, but he insisted on taking formal steps. Layla's voice was calm. You mean the same laptop you left open on the counter, the one I never touched? Logan leaned forward. I saw the code. That wasn't some random browsing. You were building something, using proprietary software. Layla narrowed her eyes. You think I'm stupid enough to tamper with your system in plain view of a dozen cameras? Logan's expression flickered. Justin interjected. Let's not escalate this. Layla, maybe you can explain. I don't owe either of you an explanation, Layla cut in. But since you're pressing charges, let's talk about what was actually on that laptop. Logan's confidence faltered. Excuse me? I wasn't coding for you, Layla said, voice rising. I was debugging a UI framework I've been building for over a year. I have time-stamped files, GitHub commits, and a prototype on my personal drive. What I opened was a text editor you had minimized on your desktop. Not corporate software, just a blank notepad window. If your team wants to talk proprietary, they should clean their own house first. Justin looked stunned. Logan's jaw tightened. I'll call my attorney, Logan said quietly, standing. You'll be hearing from our legal team. Layla didn't flinch. Great. Have them talk to mine, and make sure they spell defamation correctly. Logan stormed out, leaving Justin pale and silent. Layla turned and left the office without another word, but the moment she stepped back into the dining area, all eyes were on her. Someone had been recording. Tiffany, phone in hand, tried to look casual, but Layla caught the flicker of guilt in her glance. That night, the video hit Twitter. A waitress accused of hacking a CEO's laptop calmly tears down his case. It went viral within hours. But the attention wasn't just digital. The next morning, Layla got a call from a number she didn't recognize. Miss Carter, the voice said. Yes? My name's Simone Lee. I'm with SourcePoint Tech. We saw the video. More importantly, we saw your code. We'd like to fly you out for a meeting. Layla blinked. Wait, what? We have a position open. Senior UI Architect. It would be an understatement to say your skills impressed our CTO. Are you available next week? She stared at the wall, stunned, silent. Miss Carter? Yes, Layla said slowly. I'm available. The call ended, and Layla sat on her bed in silence. Outside, the city buzzed like always, unaware of how drastically her world had just shifted. At the restaurant, things were changing too. Justin had received an internal investigation order. Staff whispered that Logan's name was on a quiet suspension list. Tiffany, too, had been put on leave for unauthorized phone use. But none of that mattered as much as the note Layla found in her locker the next day. Typed, unsigned. They never saw you coming. Don't stop now. And for the first time in weeks, Layla smiled. Not bitter, not guarded, just ready. The hush in the room was louder than any scream. Jamal stood at the head of the conference table, shoulders squared, brows furrowed. He glanced down at the large monitor where Zoe's code continued to cycle through in real time. The silence dragged on, heavy and oppressive, as everyone in the room struggled to make sense of what they'd just seen. Where did you learn to write code like that? Jamal's voice finally broke the quiet, cutting through the tension like a scalpel. Zoe met his gaze, her expression calm, unflinching. Self-taught, she replied. nights, weekends. I couldn't afford school, so I found what I needed online. Forums, open source platforms, trial and error. Across the table, Adrian shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his once cocky demeanor now wilted like a dying flower. Next to him, Cheryl clutched a notepad she hadn't written on in minutes, her eyes darting between Zoe and Jamal, as if waiting for someone to snap out of a spell. Jamal leaned back slightly, folding his arms. You reverse-engineered our algorithm, improved it. Do you understand how insane that is? Zoe nodded. I understand it's better now. It wasn't arrogance. It wasn't even pride. Just quiet certainty, something that rattled everyone in the room more than if she'd shouted from the rooftop. Jamal took a slow breath, then turned to the engineers seated at the far end of the table. Is it true? He asked. Can someone confirm? A younger developer, Nate, who had been furiously typing into his laptop, raised his hand slightly. Yeah, I've been cross-referencing her structure with our dev build. Her logic is cleaner. It solves the recursive load balancing error we've been chasing for months. Jamal's eyes narrowed. Why the hell didn't any of you catch this before? Adrian opened his mouth, but no sound came out. His usual sharp words had dissolved into sheer disbelief. Zoe had just outclassed him, in front of everyone. Jamal turned back to Zoe. Walk me through your process. She stepped forward, completely composed, and clicked through a few windows. You built your language model using a hybrid of LSTM and transformer layers, but your problem was in the data pipeline. You're letting low-priority noise inflate batch processing time. I filtered that out with an adaptive threshold gate. Hold up. Nate practically slid out of his chair, eyes wide. You built a gate like that from scratch? I did, Zoe said simply. Jamal leaned on the edge of the table, the storm behind his eyes now replaced with something else, wonder maybe. I thought you were a waitress. I still am, she said, just not only that. The room shifted again. Perceptions shattered quietly, as if everyone had been squinting at a blurry photo and it had suddenly snapped into focus. Zoe was no longer the girl in the background who refilled coffees and cleared dishes. She was something else entirely. Jamal's jaw clenched, but this time not in anger. Why didn't you come forward earlier? I tried, she said, 2 years ago. I sent an application to your internship program. Never got a response. Then I emailed a suggestion through the beta feedback portal. No reply. I figured maybe the code would speak louder than my resume ever could. Adrian let out a dry, humorless laugh. And you just happened to work here, in the same building? Zoe looked him dead in the eye. Sometimes proximity is all you can afford. The tension in the room was molten now. Jamal stared at the lines of code on the screen, his mind clearly racing. What's your endgame? He asked. What do you want? Zoe didn't hesitate. I want a seat at the table, not for pity, not for optics, because I earned it. For a moment, nobody moved. Nobody dared. Then the glass door creaked open, and Ms. Price, the company's head of operations, entered holding a tablet. Jamal, I need you for the investor. She paused as her eyes caught the screen. Her gaze flicked to Zoe, then to Jamal. Am I interrupting something? Jamal exhaled slowly. Yeah, a revolution. An hour later, Jamal sat alone in his corner office, blinds half drawn. He stared at Zoe's profile on his screen, which, up until this morning, had contained nothing but a generic HR log from the cafeteria staff roster. Now that file was exploding with documentation, screenshots, test results, live deployment notes. He hadn't seen something this disruptive since he built the company's original framework out of his dorm room at Howard. He picked up his phone, dialing quickly. "Lydia," he said to his head of HR, "I need you to draft a new offer. Senior AI engineer. Send it to Zoe Reynolds. Full salary, full equity. Starting tomorrow." He hung up. Then, almost as an afterthought, he stood and walked back to the conference room. Adrian was still there, pacing, muttering to himself. When he saw Jamal, he straightened. "Listen, boss, I know this whole thing looked wild, but let's not forget who's built this architecture over the past 5 years." "I haven't forgotten," Jamal said coolly. "But what Zoe did today, you didn't see it coming. That's the difference." Adrian's nostrils flared. "You're not seriously thinking of giving her a spot on the team, are you?" "I'm giving her a seat you never thought to offer her," Jamal replied. "And if that makes you uncomfortable, maybe you should ask yourself why." Adrian didn't respond. He didn't need to. The silence answered for him. Back in the cafeteria, Zoe wiped her hands on a dish towel, looking out the window at the skyline. She hadn't said yes yet, not officially, but the gears were turning. Change didn't wait for permission, and Zoe Reynolds wasn't going to wait anymore. The sound of typing echoed faintly through the office walls of Echelon Tech as midnight crept over Manhattan. The once buzzing innovation hub was now a cavern of silence, save for the occasional hum of a server rack or the flicker of a security camera. Downstairs, in the executive lounge that hadn't seen much activity since the company's last investor mixer, a lone figure leaned over a glowing laptop. It was Ava. A mug of lukewarm coffee sat beside her, untouched. Her eyes, sharp and focused, scanned lines of code as if each variable held the key to a new universe. She typed with grace and speed, reworking fragments of her own creation, something she had started before being falsely accused. But now, this wasn't about proving anything to Carter. This was about finishing something that mattered to her. Footsteps approached from behind. "You're still here," a voice said gently. Ava turned. It was Maya, her friend from IT. Maya wore her usual hoodie and jeans combo, her hair tied up in a messy bun. "I could ask you the same," Ava replied, smiling. Maya handed her a fresh cup of coffee. "Security told me someone was logged in from the lounge. Figured it was you. You okay?" Ava hesitated. "I think I'm finally more than okay." Maya sat beside her, watching the screen. "Is that the learning model you talked about?" Ava nodded. "It started as a personal project, something to help me teach myself more efficiently. But it's evolved. Now it adapts to how people think, especially those from underrepresented backgrounds. It doesn't assume a baseline. It learns you." Maya's eyes widened. "You've built adaptive cognitive scaffolding on your own?" "Well, I had help," Ava said, chuckling softly, "from every moment I was underestimated." Maya leaned back. "You're gonna flip this whole place upside down." The elevator dinged suddenly. They both turned. Carter Grant stepped out, looking oddly composed for someone showing up at nearly 1 a.m. His suit jacket was gone, sleeves rolled up, tie undone. His eyes locked on Ava as he made his way to them. "You broke into the system again?" His tone was flat, unreadable. Ava didn't stand. "No, I logged in with my admin access. It was never revoked." Carter's jaw tensed. "You've been accessing proprietary databases after hours." "I've been fixing your broken model," she replied, "the one your lead devs couldn't stabilize for over a year." Maya stood up, but Ava raised her hand slightly, signaling it was okay. Carter took a breath. Ava, listen. There are procedures, legal. Don't, Ava said, voice calm but steel-edged. Not tonight. He paused. What are you trying to prove? That you were wrong, she answered, eyes meeting his. About me, about the assumptions you made the second you saw a black waitress sitting at your terminal. Carter remained silent. The room felt like it held its breath. I don't need your permission, Ava continued, but you'll want to see this. She turned the screen toward him. A live simulation ran in real time. A mock classroom interface adjusted dynamically to different users. 1 minute, it displayed content using visual mapping for a user identified as dyslexic. The next, it read content aloud for someone with limited literacy. A third user, a veteran with PTSD, interacted with a calm, non-linear system that never timed out. Carter stared, trying to process. You built this? Yeah, Ava said, closing the laptop. But you can't have it. At least, not yet. What do you mean? I've filed for an independent patent, she said, rising now. And I've secured angel funding thanks to a few people who did take the time to learn my name before judging my abilities. Carter's face drained of color. Ava, wait. You're telling me you're leaving? You're walking away from this company? I was never really part of this company, she said with a half smile, not the way you saw it. Silence. Then Carter reached for the back of a nearby chair. You're making a mistake. Maybe, Ava said, or maybe I just realized I don't need to fix a system that was never built for me. I can build my own. Maya gave her a nod, proud. But just before Ava turned to leave, Carter spoke again. This time quieter. What happens if we want in? She looked back. Then you stop asking whether someone belongs at the table and start building tables where everyone fits. A beat passed, then she walked out. Later that night, Ava stood alone on the rooftop garden of her small apartment building, the city lights twinkling beneath her like a constellation of futures. She pulled out her phone, checked the notification. Patent confirmed. Another message blinked through. Venture funding approved. But more than that, it was the peace in her chest. Not vengeance, not pride, freedom. Below her, New York moved as it always did, relentlessly, indifferently. But for the first time in years, Ava felt something shift inside. Tomorrow, the world would know her name. Not because she had to scream for it, but because she had written it in code, in purpose, in truth. And no one could take that from her. The news spread like wildfire. By Monday morning, half the tech campus had heard some version of what had happened during the emergency Sunday meeting. People whispered in elevators. Teams huddled in glass-walled offices, side-eyeing each other as if waiting for the next bomb to drop. The name Amara was being spoken with both reverence and confusion. She was everywhere and nowhere at once. Inside the executive boardroom on the top floor, the atmosphere had changed completely. The sleek, cold professionalism that once filled the space was replaced by unease. Gavin Cross stood at the head of the table, arms folded, face tight. She hasn't signed the contract, he said through clenched teeth. Elena shifted in her chair. You're surprised. You publicly accused her of trespassing and tampering with your hardware. And now suddenly you want to crown her lead engineer? Would you trust you? Gavin didn't respond. He knew she was right. Downstairs, Amara was sitting in the quiet of the staff cafeteria, sipping her coffee. She had declined all media interviews, declined the offer from Crosstech to join the leadership team, declined everything, at least for now. Camille rushed in, breathless. Girl, have you seen the latest update? They've launched a full internal investigation. HR is quietly reviewing Gavin's conduct. Amara raised an eyebrow. About time. Camille slid into the chair across from her. You know people are saying you planned all this? That you hacked into his computer weeks ago to plant the prototype and bait him into catching you. Amara chuckled. I didn't even know they had custom firmware until I saw the debug logs on his desktop. So you're saying the genius move wasn't premeditated? I'm saying they made it too easy. Meanwhile, upstairs, Gavin was spiraling. In a desperate attempt to control the narrative, he called a press meeting that afternoon. He stood at the podium, flanked by 2 PR handlers, and gave a prepared statement. At Crosstech, we celebrate innovation in all forms. Miss Amara Lewis is a testament to what raw, unfiltered talent can achieve. The room sat silent. A reporter from TechWire raised a hand. Did you or did you not accuse her of security breaches before knowing who she was? Gavin hesitated. That matter has been reviewed. There were misunderstandings, but I take full responsibility. The next question hit harder. Are you stepping down? He blinked. No, I intend to lead this company into its next chapter. Downstairs, Amara watched the press conference on her phone, unimpressed. Camille sat next to her, shaking her head. Man, that man's got audacity. Amara sighed. He's trying to clean up the surface, but the rot goes deeper. That night, she went home and opened her laptop. Her inbox was full. NASA, Google X, private investors, even the Department of Defense had inquired, but it was the email from Hope Code Collective that caught her eye. A non-profit she'd never heard of, dedicated to supporting underrepresented developers in tech. Subject line, we saw what you built. Let's build together. She opened it and her heart skipped. They didn't want to own her. They wanted to fund her. To give her the tools and team to launch her own platform, one that would push ethical AI forward without the red tape and corporate posturing. She sat in silence for a long time, then closed the email and looked around her small apartment. The room was quiet, but her mind raced with blueprints, ideas, names. She didn't need to work for Gavin Cross. She could be the next Gavin Cross without the ego. The following morning, she walked into Crosstech one last time. The executive lobby fell into silence as she passed through. This time, no one stopped her. No one questioned her presence. She took the elevator to the top floor, walked into the boardroom, and looked Gavin in the eye. I'm declining the contract, she said flatly. Gavin's eyes narrowed. You'd rather fade back into the background? No, she replied. I'm building my own system, one that doesn't require your permission to innovate or your apology to exist. She turned and walked out, leaving behind not just a stunned CEO, but a legacy. Camille was waiting outside. Well, I'm out, and I'm just getting started. That day, headlines didn't just report a scandal. They reported a shift. A waitress who had once cleared empty glasses was now clearing the path for a new era in tech. And the world was watching. The courtroom was filled with a strange, anxious silence. Every eye was on Kira. Every breath hung in the air, waiting to be released. For a moment, she simply stood there, composed in her white blouse and black slacks, not a hint of arrogance in her posture, just a quiet fire. Across the room, Mr. Whitmore sat rigid in his seat, his expression unreadable. His attorneys whispered urgently in his ear, but he barely responded. The man who once barked orders in glass-walled boardrooms now looked like a student waiting for his grades to be posted, except this time the results were about more than money. This was about integrity. The judge cleared his throat. Ms. Carter, please proceed. Kira nodded and approached the center of the courtroom. She tapped the keyboard to pull up the final slide of her presentation. The screen behind her flickered to life with lines of code, dates, timestamps, and an internal Slack chat log. She turned to face the audience, then looked straight at the CEO. "You want to know why I used your computer?" Her voice was clear, calm, but carried a simmering edge. "Because I was cleaning up a mess you created." The judge raised an eyebrow. The room leaned in. "This code," she continued, gesturing toward the screen, "was developed to replace your company's outdated AI moderation system. But you weren't interested in better results. You were interested in silencing voices that didn't fit your narrative, particularly the voices of people who looked like me." The judge shifted in his seat. The CEO swallowed hard. "I accessed your terminal for one reason: to back up my work and protect myself. Because I knew once this model hit the internal review stage, someone would try to bury it, or take credit for it, or both." Then came the twist no one saw coming. She clicked to the next slide, revealing a signed email from Whitmore himself, time-stamped the same night he accused her of unauthorized access. In it, he forwarded her codebase to another tech firm's CEO with a single line: "Think we can repurpose this under a new name?" Gasps erupted across the room. Even the judge sat back, stunned. One of the board members in attendance, a sharp-dressed older woman, stood up slowly. "Wait a minute. That's the same tech we launched in beta last month." Whitmore's face turned ghost white. "It was mine," Kira said, her voice firmer now. "You were already preparing to rebrand it, claim ownership, and erase me in the process. But I kept backups, and now every shred of it is logged and traceable." The prosecutor rose. "Your Honor, based on this new evidence, we request a motion to open a formal investigation into corporate theft, fraud, and wrongful termination." The judge didn't even blink. "Motion granted. Bailiff, please escort Mr. Whitmore into custody pending investigation." The entire courtroom froze. Kira stood there, not smug, not vengeful, just tired. Exhausted from the months of hiding, doubting herself, second-guessing her worth. She glanced at the few familiar faces from the cafe who had come to support her. Luis gave her a subtle thumbs up. Nora had tears in her eyes. As Whitmore was led out of the room in cuffs, he glanced over his shoulder. "This isn't over," he muttered. Kira met his eyes for the last time. "No," she replied, "it's just beginning. But now I'm writing the story." Outside the courthouse, a swarm of reporters awaited. Someone shoved a mic in her face. "Miss Carter, any comment?" She paused, then smiled. "Yeah, maybe now little black girls who love computers won't be told they're just good with customer service. Maybe now they'll be taken seriously from the start." Her voice echoed across live streams, broadcasts, and social media feeds. Comments poured in. Messages flooded her inbox. And in that moment, Kira Carter stopped being a waitress or a cautionary tale. She became a symbol. Weeks later, Whitmore's company issued a public apology and offered her a full settlement. She declined. Instead, she launched her own startup, a tech company, focused on ethical AI and mentorship for underrepresented voices in coding. On opening day, dozens of young women lined up outside her office, resumes in hand, hope in their eyes. And as she stood by the window watching them arrive, Nora walked in with a smirk. "You ever think it would come to this?" Kira laughed. "Every day. I just never thought I'd live long enough to see it." Then she looked straight at the camera for a special interview segment. "Remember," she said, Talent doesn't come with a dress code, and brilliance doesn't always come from behind a corner office. Sometimes it comes from a coffee-stained apron and a mind full of code. And with that, the screen faded to black. What would you have done if you were in Kira's shoes? Drop your thoughts below, and don't forget to like, comment, and share this story if you believe that no one should be underestimated based on how they look or where they work. Let's rewrite the rules together.